For 50 years, they were a complete mystery. Just thousands of clay tablets from the age of Greek heroes, all covered in a strange script that nobody could read. But this is the story of how a small group of intellectual detectives cracked a 3,000-year-old code. And in doing so, they completely rewrote the first chapter of Western civilization.
And get this, even before a single word of the script was deciphered, the archaeologist who discovered the first tablets, Sir Arthur Evans, he totally understood what was at stake. He knew that to really understand classical Greece, you had to understand this even older, mysterious world. Talk about a prophetic statement, especially considering that for decades, this ancient world was completely and utterly silent.
So, the mystery really begins with these tablets, and here's the crazy part, they were never supposed to survive. They were basically just administrative records, like the last year's receipts, scribbled onto wet clay. But when the palaces they were in burned down around 1200 BCE, the very fires that destroyed a civilization accidentally baked these tablets hard as brick, preserving them for thousands of years.
And they were popping up all over the Greek world, from Crete to the mainland strongholds of Pylos and Mycenae. Yeah, the very same places you read about in Homer's epics. And they all posed the same massive questions. Who wrote these things? What language were they even speaking? For half a century, all scholars could do was just stare at these strange symbols and wonder.
Okay, so to be precise, the codebreakers were really focused on just one of two scripts they found. The older one, Linear A, is found all over Crete, and believe it or not, it's still undeciphered to this day. But Linear B, our script, that was different. On the island of Crete, it was only found at the main palace of Knossos, but it was all over the Greek mainland, and that was a huge clue. This wasn't just some local Cretan script, it belonged to the powerful rulers of mainland Greece.
So how in the world do you crack a code when you don't know the script or the language? Well, you don't start with wild guesses. You start with slow, methodical, painstaking detective work. And that's exactly where our heroes come into the story.
The first steps were all about pure, cold logic. First, an American scholar named Emmett L. Bennett Jr. did the seriously tedious work of cataloging every single one of the 87 signs. Then, Alice Kober, a classics professor from Brooklyn, had this amazing breakthrough. She noticed certain groups of 3 words that were almost identical, but just had different endings. She guessed correctly that this was the same word with different grammatical cases, like king, kings, and to the king. And this let her build her famous grid, grouping signs that shared the same consonant or the same vowel, based purely on those patterns.
And this right here is the crucial point. Kober's grid was a work of pure, unbiased logic. It was built completely on evidence from the tablets themselves, with zero assumptions about what the language might be. She had literally built the machine that could crack the code, a key just waiting for the right lock. And tragically, she died before she ever got to see it used.
The final, incredible breakthrough came from a total wildcard, Michael Ventris, a brilliant British architect and amateur linguist who had been obsessed with this script since he was a teenager. He took Kober's methodical grid and added a daring spark of pure genius.
You see, for years, most experts, including the great Sir Arthur Evans, believed the language just couldn't be Greek. They were convinced the Mycenaeans were a different people. But Ventris decided to test a wild hypothesis. What if everyone was wrong? What if the lords of Mycenae and Pylos were in fact speaking Greek?
So Ventris tested this idea on Kober's word triplets. The ones he suspected were names of cities in Crete. He started plugging in his what if it's Greek values. And suddenly, it worked. The signs lined up perfectly. Knossos became Knossos. Paito became Phaistos. The names of ancient Cretan cities, known from other historical texts, just leaped right off the page.
And that was the aha moment. It wasn't just a couple of words, it was a total chain reaction. Because of Kober's logical grid, once you identified one sound, it instantly gave you clues to all the other signs in the same row or column. The whole grid just lit up. Dozens of signs suddenly had phonetic values, and for the first time in 3,000 years, the script began to speak.
The answer was undeniable. The language of the tablets was Greek. Not the classical Greek we all know, but a much older, more archaic version. It was a discovery that pushed back the history of written Greek by over 500 years, deep, deep into the Bronze Age. So the code was broken.
This silent world could finally speak, and you can bet everyone was hoping for epic poems, for lost histories, maybe a prequel to the Iliad. But what they found was, well, something very different. And in its own way, it was even more revealing.
Yeah, forget epics. These were basically spreadsheets. The tablets were the meticulous records of a top-down palace bureaucracy. I mean, they logged everything. Rations for workers, how much bronze to give the smiths, offerings for the gods, and even inventories of spices like coriander and cumin. We were literally reading the day-to-day paperwork of a Bronze Age kingdom.
And the scale of this whole operation was just immense. At the Palace of Knossos alone, the tablets show a state-run textile industry that controlled the wool from an estimated 100,000 sheep. This was no loose collection of villages. This was a highly organized economic powerhouse.
A typical entry looks a lot like this. A list of smiths, that's kakeu in Mycenaean Greek, and the amount of bronze, or kako, that was given to each one. These weren't grand royal pronouncements. This was the raw data of a command economy, showing us exactly how everything was managed. So, you might be thinking, okay, they found a bunch of old accounting records, big deal. But let me tell you, the impact this had on our understanding of history was nothing short of revolutionary.
Just look at this timeline. It shows just how much the clock got pushed back. Before Linear B, we thought written Greek started around the time of Homer, maybe 750 BCE. This decipherment proved that Greek was a written language used for administration as early as 1450 BCE, a full 7 centuries earlier. It also revealed this dark age, where after the palaces fell, the very art of writing was just lost in Greece for hundreds of years.
And here it is, the biggest takeaway of all. For the very first time, the legendary world of Homer's heroes, Agamemnon of Mycenae, Nestor of Pylos, was connected to a real, historical, Greek-speaking people. The names, the places, the gods found in these tablets, they provided a concrete, historical anchor for the myths that are the bedrock of Western literature.
And that leaves us with one final mind-bending thought. We only have these records because of the fires that destroyed everything. They are, essentially, the contents of the palace recycling bin accidentally baked for posterity. So the ultimate question remains, what was lost? What histories, what poems, what letters, written on perishable stuff like papyrus or parchment, disappeared forever, leaving us with only the ghost of a great civilization, found in its spreadsheets?